Meet Vanessa, your replacement. Those were the exact words my husband used at our own anniversary dinner, his hand resting on her shoulder, champagne glass in the other. I found the CEO succession documents 2 days later, hidden in my father's old briefcase. My name was the only one listed, not my husband's, not Vanessa's, mine. Before we dive back in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe, because, tomorrow's story is something truly special I can't wait to share. The restaurant was Bellini's, the same place where Ryan had proposed 7 years earlier. Candlelight flickered across white tablecloths and crystal glasses, casting long shadows against the exposed brick walls. I'd spent 3 hours getting ready, hoping to recapture something we'd lost between board meetings and late-night strategy sessions. My navy silk dress still had the price tag tucked in my purse. Too expensive, but worth it for what I thought was a special night. Ryan was already seated when I arrived. Not alone. A woman occupied what should have been my chair. Early 30s, sleek blonde hair pulled back into an impeccable bun, wearing a red sheath dress that probably cost more than our first apartment's security deposit. Her manicure matched her lipstick, flawless attention to detail. I recognized the type immediately. We hired dozens like her at Meridian Technologies. I stood, frozen by the host stand, watching them laugh over something on her phone. Ryan's hand briefly touched hers as he leaned in to see the screen. The host cleared his throat behind me. "Mrs. Lawson, would you like to be seated?" Ryan looked up, spotted me. No guilt flashed across his face, just the practiced smile he used when closing business deals. "Elena! There you are. Perfect timing." I approached slowly, each step deliberate despite the tremor I felt building from my ankles upward. The woman didn't move from my chair. Instead, Ryan pulled over a seat from the next table, positioning it slightly behind them both. "Sorry for the surprise," he said, voice low with practiced intimacy. "I wanted to make this special." I glanced. Between them, still standing. "Make what special exactly?" He beamed, gesturing toward the woman with a sweeping hand. "Meet Vanessa Patel, your replacement." The restaurant noise dimmed around me, as though someone had suddenly stuffed cotton in my ears. I felt blood rush to my face. "My what?" Ryan laughed, the sound brittle and performative. "At Meridian, of course. The board approved her this morning as the new chief strategy officer. My position. The one I'd built from the ground up over 11 years. The role I'd pioneered when Meridian was just my father's struggling tech startup operating out of our garage." I looked at Vanessa. She extended a hand, perfectly poised, wearing my father's watch. The vintage Rolex he'd given me when we'd secured our first $1 million client. "It's an honor to finally meet you, Elena. Ryan has told me so much about your early contributions to the company." Early contributions. As if I was already a chapter in Meridian's history book. Past tense. Archived. "I'm sorry," I said, not taking her hand. "There must be a mistake. I'm still CSO at Meridian. My father is stepping back from day-to-day operations," Ryan finished smoothly. "You know how his health has been. The doctors recommended reducing stress. My father's heart attack had been 6 months ago. Mild, the doctor said. He'd been back at work within 3 weeks, against medical advice. He didn't mention any of this to me." My voice sounded distant, even to myself. Ryan's smile tightened at the edges. "We thought it would be easier coming from me, more celebratory." He gestured to the champagne already chilling in an ice bucket beside the table. "After all, this means you can finally focus on what you really want." "And what is that exactly?" "Family," he said, as though it was obvious. "That big house in the suburbs we've been talking about. Kids. You're 35, Elena. The clock is ticking. We hadn't discussed children in over 2 years. Not since I'd found him in bed with his assistant. Not since the couple's therapy where he'd promised to change, to respect my career, to rebuild trust. I felt something crack inside me. Not loudly, but with the quiet finality of ice splitting under too much pressure. I sat in the third chair, the awkward afterthought, and reached for the bottle of champagne before either of them could stop me. I poured myself a full glass, not the delicate pour Ryan preferred at business functions. "So," I said, raising my glass with a steadiness that surprised me, "to my replacement. May she enjoy warming my chair." Vanessa's composure slipped for just a moment. She glanced at Ryan, who cleared his throat. "Elena, maybe we should order first. Talk about the transition plan. The board has been very generous with your exit package." Exit package. They'd already negotiated my departure, my husband and the board, without a single word to me. I set my glass down untouched. "Does my father know you're wearing his watch, Vanessa?" Her hand instinctively covered the Rolex. "Ryan said it was a company tradition for the CSO position." "Did he mention it was a gift to me when I brought in the Westlake account? The client that saved the company?" Ryan's jaw clenched. "Elena, don't make this difficult. The decision's been made. The board vote was unanimous." "Including my father's vote?" A flicker of discomfort crossed his face. He abstained. For obvious reasons. I stood up, smoothing my dress. "I need to use the restroom. Excuse me." In the privacy of the marble-lined bathroom, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I pulled out my phone and called my father's direct line, the private number only family knew. It went to voicemail. I tried his assistant. "Margaret, it's Elena. Is my father still in the office?" "He left early, Ms. Lawson. Said he needed to sort through some old files at home. Asked not to be disturbed." Old files. My father never looked at old files. "Thank you, Margaret." I looked at myself in the mirror. Really looked. Gray eyes like my father's. The same stubborn set to my jaw that had appeared in every company photo since we'd incorporated Meridian Technologies. My mother's high cheekbones. The small scar above my right eyebrow from the time I'd fallen asleep at my desk during our first major product launch. This face had helped build a $500 million company from nothing, and Ryan thought he could replace it with a newer model. I walked back to the table, picked up my purse, and looked directly at Vanessa. "The Westlake contract comes up for renewal next quarter. They won't sign without me. Neither will Axiom or Blue Summit. Their CEOs have my personal cell number, not the company line." I turned to Ryan. "The innovation pipeline only exists in my private server. And the Newton acquisition strategy? It's up here." I tapped my temple. Not a single page of documentation. Ryan's face darkened. "Elena, don't be childish. This is business." "No," I said. "This was family. Now it's business." I left them sitting. There, the champagne growing warm in its bucket. The host gave me a sympathetic look as I passed. In my car, I didn't turn on the ignition immediately. Instead, I typed a quick message to my father. "Coming over. Need to talk about Meridian and Ryan." His response came seconds later. "Back door unlocked. Use the key in the garden gnome. Bring the blue briefcase from my desk at home. Don't tell anyone you're coming." I drove home first, the penthouse Ryan and I had purchased when Meridian went public. Empty, except for our housekeeper, who looked surprised to see me home so early. My father's home office took up the smallest bedroom in our apartment. Ryan had always complained about it, called it wasted space. I unlocked the door and went straight to the antique mahogany desk. The blue briefcase was in the bottom drawer. Heavy, locked. The combination was my mother's birthday. It always was. Inside, beneath stacks of legal papers and old photographs, I found it. The CEO succession plan, drafted by the company's original board, signed by my father the day Meridian incorporated, updated just last month. In the event of my stepping down or inability to serve, control of Meridian Technologies passes directly to my daughter, Elena Lawson, as Chief Executive Officer and primary shareholder. Primary shareholder. The words pulsed on the page like a heartbeat. I checked the stock distribution documents beneath. 51% ownership. Transferred to a trust in my name, Ryan's name appeared much further down. 8%. The standard executive allotment. I closed the briefcase, a strange calm settling over me. Not rage, not even hurt anymore. Just clarity. I picked up my, phone, dialed the number for Wilson Blake, head of the board of directors, my father's oldest friend. Wilson, it's Elena Lawson. Cancel tomorrow's board meeting. We need to reschedule. I paused. With me presiding. When I hung up, I took one last look around the apartment Ryan and I had shared for 5 years. The modern furniture he'd insisted on. The cold, impersonal art pieces that meant nothing to me. I wouldn't be coming back here tonight. I had a company to reclaim. I didn't sleep that night. Not a single moment. It took a lot of care and time to prepare and narrate this for you. So if you're enjoying it, a quick subscribe really helps and means the world to us. All right, let's get back to it. I drove to my father's house in the foothills outside the city, the same modest ranch-style home where I'd grown up, where we'd built the first Meridian prototype in the garage. The place Ryan had always called charmingly outdated with that condescending smile. The garden gnome by the side door held the spare key, just as it had since I was 10. Some things never changed. I found myself grateful for that consistency as I let myself in, the blue briefcase heavy in my hand. The house was quiet except for the distant hum of my father's oxygen machine. Since the heart attack, he needed it at night, though he'd never admit it to the board. Another secret we'd kept from them. From Ryan. I found him in his study, still, dressed in his work clothes, tie loosened but not removed. Silver hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. Family photos covered the walls. Me at graduation, my mother before cancer took her, the 3 of us in front of the first Meridian office. No fancy art pieces, no designer furniture. Just history, preserved. Dad looked up as I entered, eyes tired but alert. He saw the briefcase and nodded once. You found it. Why didn't you tell me? My voice didn't shake. I was past that now. About Ryan. About Vanessa. About the board meeting. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit down, Ellie. Nobody called me Ellie anymore. Nobody except him. I needed to be sure, he said, reaching for a glass of water on his desk. About Ryan. About what he was planning. So you knew? The betrayal cut deeper. You knew and you let me walk into that dinner. Blind, Dad shook his head. I suspected, ever since he started meeting privately with Wilson and the others. Always after hours. Always when you were traveling. He took a slow breath from his oxygen tube. I needed proof before I confronted him. Before I showed you what I found. Which was what, exactly? He opened a drawer and pulled out a manila folder, sliding it across the desk to me. Inside were printouts of emails, financial records, meeting minutes I'd never seen. 3 months ago, Ryan approached the board with a restructuring plan, positioning Meridian for acquisition by Vortex Industries. My stomach dropped. Vortex was our biggest competitor, the corporate giant that had tried to crush us from day one. They can't do that without majority shareholder approval. I tapped the briefcase. Which is apparently me. Ryan convinced the board you were on board, said you wanted to step back, focus on starting a family. Dad's eyes flickered with a familiar anger. He forged your signature on preliminary documents. I only caught it because Margaret noticed the loop on your L was wrong. Margaret, Dad's assistant for 20 years. The woman who'd brought me soup when I had the flu during college finals, who'd helped me pick out my wedding dress. Another person Ryan had discounted. I flipped through the pages. each one more damning than the last. Ryan had been systematically setting this up for nearly a year. The sudden international client trips that kept me away from headquarters. The new executives hired without my input. The accounts moved to different banks. Why Vanessa? I asked, though I already knew the answer. She's Vortex's inside player. They placed her. Young enough to seem like a fresh perspective, experienced enough to seem legitimate. She's been with them for 8 years. 8 years. The exact amount of time Ryan and I had been together. Did you know about them? I forced myself to look at my father. About Ryan and her? Something in his expression softened. No, Ellie, not until tonight. That part, I'm afraid, was a surprise to me, too. I stood up, pacing the small study. The room where I'd done homework, while Dad sketched the first Meridian logo. Where I'd practiced pitches before nervous investors. Where I'd cried after Mom died and promised her I'd take care of him and the company. He wants me out completely, I said, the reality sinking in, like cold lead in my stomach. Not just demoted, erased. Yes. Dad didn't soften the blow. He never did. It was why Meridian had survived when other startups failed. Brutal honesty. The acquisition would strip your stock options through a specific buyout clause. You'd get a payout, but nothing close to what your shares are worth. And you? I turned to look at him. What happens to you in this plan? A wry smile creased his face. Ceremonial chairman emeritus. No voting power. A nice office somewhere to rot in until I die. The rage I'd kept in check at the restaurant flared. Again, white-hot and clarifying. When's the acquisition vote scheduled? Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Before or after the CSO transition announcement? After. They need you officially removed first. Otherwise, the acquisition terms aren't valid. I nodded, mind racing through scenarios, contingencies, options. Does Ryan know about this? I lifted the briefcase containing the succession documents. No. Dad's eyes gleamed with a familiar strategic light. Your mother insisted on that contingency plan when we founded the company. Always have a back door, she said. It's in the original incorporation documents, but hidden. The board approved it so long ago, most of them have forgotten. I sat back down, the adrenaline of the evening finally catching up to me. My hands trembled, slightly as I opened the briefcase again, spreading the succession papers across his desk. Why didn't you use this earlier? When you first suspected, Dad reached across the desk, his hand covering mine. Warm, steady. The hands that had taught me to solder circuit boards when I was 12. Because Meridian isn't mine anymore, Ellie. It's yours. It's been yours for years, whether I had the title or not. This is your fight. My throat tightened. I'm not sure I can do this. The woman who closed the Westlake deal can't handle one backstabbing husband and a boardroom of old men? He raised an eyebrow. I raised you better than that. Despite everything. I laughed. A single, sharp sound in the quiet room. We stayed up all night, reviewing documents, making calls to allies inside and outside the company. I changed the passwords on my private server. Dad contacted our attorneys. By 4 a.m., we had a plan. I watched the sunrise from his back porch, the same view I'd grown up with. Mountains silhouetted against a sky turning from black to deep purple, to fiery orange. I hadn't changed out of my anniversary dinner dress, now wrinkled from hours of work. The diamond ring Ryan had given me felt heavy on my finger. I twisted it off, held it up to the growing light. The stone that had once symbolized our future together now looked cold, clinical. Just another asset to be evaluated. My phone buzzed, with a text message. Ryan, where are you? Came home and you weren't here. We need to talk about your behavior at dinner. This isn't helping your case with the board. My case, as if I was on trial, as if I needed to defend myself for being betrayed. Didn't respond. Instead, I took a photo of the ring sitting on the porch railing, mountains in the background, and sent it to him without comment. His response came seconds later. "Don't be dramatic. This is business, not personal. You're being emotional. Business, not personal." The ultimate gaslighting from a man who'd planned my professional execution at our anniversary dinner. Left the ring on the railing and went inside to shower and change into clothes Dad had kept in my old bedroom. Simple black pants, white button-down shirt, my mother's silver earrings I'd left here after wearing them to her funeral. When I came downstairs, Dad was dressed too. His best suit, the one he wore for major investor meetings, no oxygen tube, his emergency heart medication tucked into his pocket where he thought I couldn't see it. "You don't have to come," I said, though part of me desperately wanted him there. "Your doctor said, my doctor can bill me extra." He straightened his tie with hands that looked suddenly older, more veined than I remembered. "I built Meridian to last generations, not to be gutted by some corporate raider with a pretty face and my daughter's husband as his puppet." I hugged him then, breathing in the familiar scent of his aftershave, the same brand he'd used since I was little. For a moment, I was that little girl again, climbing onto his lap in his home office while he reviewed spreadsheets, convinced I could help if he'd just explain what all the numbers meant. He had explained them too. Every single time. "I love you, Dad," I whispered against his shoulder. "I know, Ellie." He pulled back, eyes fierce with pride and determination. "Now let's go get your company back." We drove to the Meridian headquarters in separate cars. Not out of caution, but practicality. One last contingency, in case I needed to make a quick exit. The sun was fully up now, gleaming off the glass and steel building my father and I had designed together 5 years ago, when we'd outgrown our 4th office space. Ryan had pushed for something more traditional, more corporate. We'd overruled him. At least I'd have the satisfaction of taking back my company in a building that still bore my creative stamp. I parked in my reserved spot, the one marked E. Lawson, Chief Strategy. Officer. By tomorrow, that sign would likely be changed to Vanessa's name. Unless I succeeded. As I gathered my belongings, I spotted Ryan's car already in his space. Next to it, in the visitors section, a sleek red Porsche I didn't recognize. Vanessa. Arriving early on what she thought would be her first day as CSO, I checked my watch. 7:30 a.m. 90 minutes until the board meeting that would decide everything. 90 minutes to save what my father and I had spent 20 years building. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and reached for the door handle. Time to get to work. The lobby of Meridian Technologies hummed with its usual morning energy. Security guards nodded respectfully as I passed. Janice at reception gave me her typical bright, "Good morning, Ms. Lawson," as if yesterday had been just another day, as if today wasn't the day my husband planned to push me out of my own company. Smiled back, the practiced expression I'd perfected during thousands of client meetings. Never let them see you sweat. Mom's advice, whispered to me before my first investor pitch at 19. "Is the board gathered yet?" I asked, voice steady. Janice consulted her screen. "Most are in the executive lounge. Mr. Lawson requested breakfast catering." She hesitated, a slight furrow in her brow. "He also asked me to direct you to conference room B when you arrived, not the main boardroom. Conference. Room B, a glorified closet in the back hallway, used for vendor meetings and intern orientations." The message couldn't be clearer if Ryan had written it in neon. "Thank you, Janice." I kept my smile intact. "Please let Mr. Lawson know I'll be in my office until the meeting." "Of course." She bit her lip, lowering her voice. "Ms. Lawson, is everything all right? There've been rumors." Of course there had been. Companies ran on information, official and otherwise. And Meridian's unofficial communication network had always been particularly effective. Change is always unsettling, Janice. I leaned closer, conspiratorial. But I wouldn't worry too much. Some changes aren't as permanent as they seem. I headed toward the executive elevator. Badge still working, thankfully. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of my father entering through the side entrance, briefcase in hand, nodding to the security team he'd personally hired years ago. My office occupied the corner of the top floor, with views of both the mountains and the city skyline. Designed to capture natural light at all hours, its glass walls symbolized the transparency I'd insisted on in Meridian's corporate culture. I'd expected to find the door locked, my access revoked. Instead, it stood partially open, light spilling. From inside, I paused, listening. Voices. Ryan's low tenor. A woman's response. Vanessa. Sure, the transfer will be smooth, she was saying. We just need to manage the optics. Elena won't make a scene, Ryan responded, confidence oozing from each syllable. She cares too much about appearances, always has. I stepped into the doorway, making no effort to hide my arrival. You might want to reconsider that assessment. They both turned, startled. Ryan recovered first, straightening from where he'd been leaning against my desk. My desk, his hand darting away from Vanessa's arm. Elena. His voice shifted to the placating tone he used when we argued at home. We were just discussing the transition. I thought you'd be here earlier. Clearly. I entered the office fully, noting the changes already implemented. My personal items had been packed into a cardboard box by the door. Photos removed from the walls. A stack of Vanessa's monogrammed notebooks on the desk. My ergonomic chair replaced with a sleek white leather one I'd never seen before. They'd been thorough. I'd give them that. Vanessa stood, smoothing her skirt. Different outfit from last night, but equally impeccable. I can give you two a moment. No need. I set my purse on the visitor chair, the only familiar piece of furniture remaining. This is still my office for the next, I checked my watch, 75 minutes. I have work to do before the board. Meeting. Ryan's expression darkened. Elena, be reasonable. We agreed to meet in conference room B to discuss. I agreed to nothing. I moved behind the desk, forcing Vanessa to step aside. And I'll be attending the board meeting in the main. Boardroom as usual. That's not the plan, Vanessa interjected, a hint of panic disrupting her polished veneer. I smiled. The same smile I used when a competitor underestimated our technology during trade shows. Plans change. Ryan gripped the edge of my desk, knuckles whitening. You're making this more difficult than it needs to be? Am I? I booted up the computer, still my login credentials, another oversight. Difficulty is relative. For instance, I find it difficult to understand why my husband would conspire with a competitor to steal my company. Vanessa's intake of breath was audible, sharp, surprised. Ryan's face remained impassive, but a muscle twitched near his eye, his tell when caught in a lie. I don't know what you think you know, he began, voice lowered. But this restructuring is board approved and completely above board. Like your relationship with Vanessa? I raised an eyebrow, fingers flying across the keyboard, accessing files. They clearly thought I wouldn't see again. How long has that been going on? Since that tech conference in Seattle last year? Or earlier? Vanessa took a step toward the door. I should let you two stay. My command was quiet but firm. Since you're so eager to take my position, you should hear exactly what it entails. I looked up from the screen. Did Ryan mention the non-compete clause in your contract? The one that prohibits joining a competitor for 3 years after termination? The one with financial penalties equivalent to your annual salary times 5? Her face paled slightly beneath perfect makeup. That's not standard. It is at Meridian. For executive positions. Right there in Section 12, Paragraph 4. The section Ryan apparently forgot to remove before having HR draft your offer letter. Turned my attention back to Ryan, whose controlled facade was slipping by the second. And did you tell the board about the Vortex connection? About how Vanessa's been with them for 8 years? About how this restructuring is actually phase 1 of a hostile takeover? Ryan stepped toward me, voice dropping to a hiss. How do you know about— Oh, I know everything. I swiveled the monitor toward them, displaying the email chain between Ryan and Vortex's CEO dated 6 months ago. Every plan, every secret meeting, every dollar promised to board members for their cooperation. That's confidential. It's evidence of corporate espionage, I corrected. And breach of fiduciary duty, and fraud. Should I go on? Vanessa moved toward the door, more decisively this time. I need to make a call. To Carlton Harris at Vortex? I asked pleasantly. Don't bother. He's already received a cease and desist letter from our attorneys this morning, along with copies of these emails. She froze, hand on the doorknob. You're bluffing. I leaned back in the unfamiliar chair. Care to test that theory? The FBI takes corporate espionage quite seriously these days. Ryan stepped between us, desperation creeping into his voice. Elena, let's discuss this privately. There are aspects of this deal you don't understand. Benefits for everyone, including you. Like being introduced to my replacement at our anniversary dinner? I stood, gathering the files I'd printed. That benefit? That was poorly handled, he admitted, trying to take my arm. I stepped back. But the board has already voted. The transition is happening today. Fighting it will only embarrass you. I checked my watch again. Speaking of the board, we should head to the meeting. It starts in 30 minutes. In conference room B? Ryan insisted. No. I closed my laptop, tucking it under my arm. In the main boardroom, where I've already requested IT to set up the presentation screen for the documents everyone needs to see. Fear flickered across his face. Genuine fear. I'd seen that expression only once before when he thought he'd lost the Johnson contract 3 years ago. The one I'd salvaged with a last-minute presentation that saved his reputation. No one would be saving him today. Whatever you're planning won't work, he said, following me to the door. The decision's been made. I paused, looking back at my stripped office, at the woman who thought she could step into my life. You know what your fundamental mistake was. Ryan? I asked, voice soft. You forgot who built Meridian in the first place. It wasn't you. I walked out, heading not toward the boardroom but to the small side office where my father had set up camp years ago, insisting he needed less space as he stepped back from daily operations. He was waiting, silver hair combed neatly, oxygen tank, nowhere in sight. On his desk sat an array of documents, the original ones, not copies. Beside them, a slim tablet showing a live feed of the executive lounge, where board members mingled over coffee and pastries. Right on schedule, he said, nodding toward the screen. Wilson's getting nervous, keeps checking his watch. Wilson Blake, board chairman, Ryan's primary ally in this coup, a man who'd once bounced me on his knee at company picnics. Do they suspect anything? I asked, setting down my things. Not yet. Dad tapped the screen. But Carlton Harris just called Wilson, twice. No answer. I smiled. Vortex getting cold feet? More likely trying to warn them. He gestured to the blue briefcase. You have everything? I patted my laptop. All the evidence we need, plus emergency access to the server farm if they try to lock us out. He nodded, pride evident in his eyes. Margaret's confirmed all 7 board members are present, plus Ryan and his associate, Vanessa. I prefer corporate spy, more accurate. Despite everything, I laughed. 20 years building a technology empire, and my father still had the same direct approach to problems. Identify, confront, eliminate. Ready? I asked, offering my arm. He stood, straightening his suit jacket. I've been ready since the day. They tried to push you out of your first investor meeting because the technical details should be presented by a man. I remembered that day clearly. I'd been 22, fresh out of MIT. The investor had addressed all questions to my father, despite my name on the patent applications. Dad had stood up, pointed to me, and said, "She's the brain behind this. You want answers? You ask her." We'd walked out without the investment. Found another partner the next week who'd recognized my value immediately. That same unyielding support had carried us through every crisis Meridian had faced. It would carry us through this one, too. We stepped into the hallway together, father and daughter, founder and successor, walking in perfect sync toward the boardroom where our company's fate would be decided. Behind us, I heard Ryan's voice, urgent and strained, on a phone call. "Harris, she knows everything." "Yes, everything. I don't know how—" "No, the vote hasn't happened yet. Yes, I'll try to delay, but—" The elevator doors closed on his panicked words, carrying us to the boardroom level. "Poor planning on their part," Dad commented mildly. "Always was his weakness." I adjusted my grip on the documents. Rushing execution before confirming all variables. The elevator opened onto the boardroom level, where Margaret waited, tablet in hand, expression professionally neutral despite the storm about to break. "Good morning, Ms. Lawson, Mr. Lawson?" Her voice betrayed nothing of the chaos unfolding. "The board is assembled. Mr. Blake asked about the delay." "No delay," I assured her. "We're right on time for the meeting I called." "Very good." She fell into step beside us. "Coffee service is arranged as requested. The presentation system is ready." "Thank you, Margaret." I paused at the boardroom doors. Through the frosted glass, I could see silhouettes, 8 people, arranged around the massive table imported from Italy during Meridian's 10th anniversary celebration. The table where Ryan had first proposed the expansion that had nearly bankrupted us. The table where I'd presented the innovation strategy that saved us. The table where today I would reclaim what was mine. Dad squeezed my hand once, a gesture unseen by anyone else. "Show them who you are, Ellie." I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and pushed open the doors. "Good morning, everyone," I announced, voice clear and carrying across the suddenly silent room. "Let's talk about the future of Meridian Technologies." Not. One person at that table realized their perfectly orchestrated plan had already crumbled. Not one person, except the man standing quietly behind me, who'd taught me that the best defense wasn't just a good offense, it was striking before your opponent knew you were even in the game. Wilson Blake recovered first, rising halfway from his chair. "Elena, Gerald, we weren't expecting—" Clearly. I moved to the head of the table, the position traditionally reserved for the CEO, my father, or in his absence, the board chair, Wilson. I set down my materials, not at the head, but at the middle of the table, commanding attention from all sides. "I believe we have several matters to discuss this morning." I smiled, making eye contact with each board member in turn. Starting with the attempted corporate takeover none of you bothered to mention to the company's primary shareholder. And, with that opening volley, the battle for Meridian truly began. The boardroom always reminded me of a theater. Italian marble table is the stage, ergonomic chairs for the supporting cast, floor-to-ceiling windows providing dramatic backdrop lighting. Today, the performance unfolding had all the elements of Shakespearean drama: betrayal, ambition, and the promise of a spectacular downfall. Wilson Blake's face transitioned through multiple expressions in rapid succession: surprise, confusion, forced confidence, and finally, the first flickers of genuine concern. "Primary shareholder?" He glanced at my father, then back to me. "I'm not sure what you mean, Elena. The ownership structure is clearly outlined in our corporate bylaws." "Yes, it is." I opened the blue briefcase, extracting the succession document with deliberate slowness. Specifically in Section 8, Paragraph E. 12, which details the transfer of majority shareholding upon execution of the founder's succession plan. I placed the document on the polished table surface, sliding it toward Wilson. The room had gone completely silent. the kind of hushed anticipation that accompanies the moment before an avalanche. This document was filed with our corporate attorneys last month, I continued, voice steady, transferring 51% ownership to the Gerald Lawson Family Trust, of which I am the sole trustee and beneficiary. The boardroom doors burst open. Ryan, rushing in with Vanessa 2 steps behind. His normally perfect hair was disheveled, tie askew. "Sorry for the delay," he announced, attempting to regain control of a situation already spiraling beyond his grasp. There was a scheduling confusion. He stopped abruptly, registering my position at the table, my father standing calmly beside, me and the expressions of the board members already reviewing the succession documents. Patricia Chen, our longest-serving board member, looked up from her copy, eyes sharp behind designer glasses. "Is this verified, Gerald?" My father nodded once. "Filed with Davis and Merrick 30 days ago. Registered with the SEC last week." "That's impossible," Ryan interjected, moving toward the table. "The shareholding reports from last quarter clearly show an outdated distribution," I finished for him. "Which is why this morning's meeting agenda has been amended." I nodded to Margaret, who began distributing folders to each board member. Inside, copies of the succession plan, updated shareholding certificates, and most damning of all, printouts of the email correspondence between Ryan and Vortex Industries. Ryan lunged for Wilson's copy, but the older man pulled it away, already scanning the emails with growing alarm. "What is this?" Wilson demanded, looking between Ryan and me. "Evidence of corporate espionage," I replied calmly. "Conspiracy to commit fraud, breach of fiduciary duty. Take your pick." Vanessa remained frozen by the doorway, her perfect composure finally cracking. "This is a misunderstanding. Is it a misunderstanding that you've been employed by Vortex Industries for 8 years while interviewing for an executive position at their primary competitor?" I raised an eyebrow. "Or that you've been feeding them proprietary information through my husband for at least 6 months?" The room erupted into chaos. Board members talking over each other, papers rustling, accusations flying. Through it all, my father stood silently beside me, a presence so solid and unchanging that it anchored me against the storm. Ryan slammed his hand on the table. "This is absurd. Elena is making desperate claims because she's being replaced. The board has already voted on the restructuring." "Without complete information," Patricia Chen interrupted, waving the emails. "If these are authenticated," "They are," my father said quietly. "Our cybersecurity team confirmed their authenticity this morning." "This changes everything," James Rodriguez, our newest board member, declared. "We need to postpone any decisions until we've reviewed these allegations." Ryan's desperation was palpable now, sweat beating at his temples. "The Vortex deal is time-sensitive. We stand to lose millions if we delay. We stand to lose the entire company if we proceed," I countered. "Or did you not disclose to the board that the acquisition terms grant Vortex complete control of our intellectual property while slashing the sale price by 40% compared to market value?" More gasps, more shuffling papers. Wilson Blake looked physically ill as he reviewed the acquisition terms I'd highlighted in his folder. "I was assured this was a strategic partnership," he muttered. "Not a fire sale." "You were lied to," I said simply. "All of you were. By the man who was supposed to safeguard Meridian's interests, not sell them to the highest bidder." Ryan's face had drained of color, but his desperation gave way to calculated anger, his final defense mechanism. "This is personal," he accused, pointing at me. "Elena can't separate her emotional reaction to our marriage issues from business decisions. She's being vindictive because I've found someone else." Behind him, Vanessa flinched slightly. Even she hadn't expected to be reduced to someone else when the pressure mounted. "Is that why you held the restructuring vote without me present?" I asked, voice still calm. "Because of my emotional reactions? Or was it because you knew I'd recognize the Vortex takeover for what it was?" Patricia Chen removed her glasses, pinning Ryan with a stare that had intimidated tech executives for 3 decades. You told us Elena had recused herself from that vote due to personal matters. I said no such thing, I confirmed. In fact, I was completely unaware of the vote until last night. When my husband introduced me to my replacement at our anniversary dinner, the deliberate cruelty of that revelation wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Even James Rodriguez, Ryan's golf partner and usual ally, winced visibly. That's not how it happened, Ryan stammered, looking around for support and finding none. The dinner was meant as a courtesy, to ease the transition. By having me sit at a separate table, I asked, in the back of the restaurant while you celebrated with her? The parallels to my father's story weren't lost on me. The deliberate humiliation, the strategic isolation, the careful erasure from the narrative we'd both helped create. But unlike my father that night in the kitchen, I wasn't staying silent. The succession plan is clear, my father interjected, his first significant contribution to the conversation. As majority shareholder, Elena has final authority on any acquisition or executive restructuring. Any votes taken without her approval are non-binding. Wilson Blake shuffled uncomfortably. Gerald, with all due respect, the board acted within its authority. The board was deliberately misled, I interrupted, sliding more documents across the table. As these minutes show, you were told I had reviewed and approved the initial proposal. That signature there? Not mine. Wilson examined the document, then looked up sharply at Ryan. You assured us Elena had signed off on this. Ryan's composure finally shattered completely. The deal is already in motion. Contracts are drawn up. Press releases drafted. We can't just halt everything because Elena's feelings are hurt. My feelings? I laughed softly, the sound cutting through his bluster. This isn't about my feelings, Ryan. It's about 238 employees whose jobs would be eliminated in the streamlining phase of the Vortex acquisition. It's about our clients, who would see their service agreements voided and rates tripled. It's about our patents, which would be shelved to eliminate competition with Vortex's inferior products. I stood now, commanding the room's full attention. But most importantly, it's about Meridian itself, the company my father and I built from nothing, the company that revolutionized data security when everyone said it couldn't be done, the company you were willing to dismantle for what? A bigger office at Vortex? A 7-figure signing bonus? Ryan's silence was all the confirmation anyone needed. I turned to address the board directly. As majority shareholder, I am calling for an immediate vote of no confidence in Ryan Lawson as Chief Operating Officer of Meridian Technologies. Patricia. Chen nodded firmly. Seconded. All in favor? My father asked, his voice stronger than it had been in months. 7 hands raised immediately. Only Ryan's ally, James, hesitated, before slowly, reluctantly, raising his hand as well. The vote is unanimous, I declared. Ryan Lawson is removed from his position, effective immediately. Ryan lunged toward me, face contorted with rage. You can't do this to me. I made this company what it is today. I brought in the investors, the clients. Security, my father called calmly into the intercom. 2 security officers appeared almost instantly, both veterans I'd personally hired when we'd expanded the headquarters. Please escort Mr. Lawson from the building, I instructed. His access credentials have already been deactivated. This isn't over, Ryan hissed as the guards approached. You think you've won, but you have no idea what's coming. The market will destroy you without me. I met his gaze steadily. I survived your betrayal, Ryan. The market doesn't scare me. As they led him toward the door, I turned to Vanessa, who had remained frozen throughout the confrontation. I assume you can find your own way out. Your Vortex employers are probably eager for an update. Something shifted in her expression. Not quite remorse, but recognition. Professional respect, perhaps. For what it's worth, it wasn't personal. Selling. Out my company? Sleeping with my husband? Which part wasn't personal? She had no answer for that. After they'd gone, a heavy silence settled over the boardroom. The board members exchanged uncertain glances, the morning's revelations still sinking in. Wilson Blake cleared his throat. Elena, I want to formally apologize. Had I known? But you should have known, my father interrupted, voice gentle but firm. You've been on this board for 15 years, Wilson. You've watched Elena grow this company from 10 employees to hundreds. You attended her graduation, her wedding, and yet you believed she would step aside without a word? Without a fight? Wilson had the grace to look ashamed. We were told what we wanted to hear. And you didn't question it, I added. Because it was easier to believe Ryan, a man, than to verify with me. No one contradicted me. They couldn't. So where do we go from here? Patricia asked, ever practical. I gathered my documents, closing the blue briefcase with a decisive click. First, we contact our attorneys to issue a formal statement repudiating any agreements with Vortex. Then we call an all-hands meeting to reassure the staff. No layoffs, no restructuring, no acquisition. And the leadership question? James Rodriguez ventured. With Ryan gone? The succession plan is already in place, my father answered. Elena Lawson assumes the position of Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately. I will remain as chairman of the board in an advisory capacity. One by one, the board members nodded their agreement. Not that they had much choice. With 51% ownership, I could have dissolved the entire board if I'd wanted to. But Meridian had always been about collaboration, not dictatorial power. That wouldn't change under my leadership. If there's nothing else, I concluded, this meeting is adjourned. Margaret will schedule individual briefings with each of you this afternoon to address any concerns. They filed out quietly, subdued by the morning's drama and their own complicity in what had nearly happened. Only Patricia Chen paused at the door, turning back to meet my gaze. Your mother would be proud, she said simply, then left. Alone with my father in the suddenly quiet boardroom, I finally allowed myself to exhale. A long, shuddering breath that carried the tension of the past 24 hours. You did it, Ellie, Dad said, placing a hand on my shoulder. We did it, I corrected, covering his hand with mine. I couldn't have... A sharp knock interrupted us. Margaret stood in the doorway, expression grave. Ms. Lawson, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's something you need to see. She crossed to the large display screen on the wall, tapping commands into her tablet. The company newsfeed appeared, dominated by a breaking story. Meridian Technologies in turmoil. Coup attempt fails as founder's daughter seizes control. Below it, a photo of Ryan being escorted from the building, face twisted with rage. Beside it, an old picture of me, from last year's charity gala, looking polished but stern. It's already hit all the tech blogs, Margaret reported. Ryan must have contacted the press the moment he left. I skimmed the article, noting the strategic use of words like hostile, emotional, and unprecedented. The narrative was clear. A spurned wife using Daddy's company to exact revenge on her husband. Not a word about the Vortex connection or the fraudulent documents. My father read over, my shoulder, his breath catching. They're trying to control the story. They always do, I replied, straightening my shoulders. But they forget one thing. What's that? He asked. I turned to Margaret, decision already made. Schedule a press conference, 1 hour, the main lobby. All staff invited. And call Davis and Merrick. I want our full legal team present. Margaret nodded, already typing. What should I tell the press about the topic? I smiled, the first genuine smile since this ordeal began. Tell them the new CEO of Meridian Technologies is making her first official statement. As Margaret hurried off, my father raised an eyebrow. Going on the offensive already? They want a story about a vindictive woman scorned? I shrugged. I'll give them a story about corporate espionage, attempted fraud, and the CEO who stopped it. Much more interesting for their headlines, don't you think? He laughed then, the sound I'd been missing for months. Warm, full, unburdened by illness or worry. That's my girl. I gathered my things, mind already racing with the points I needed to make, the narrative I needed to control. I'd spent my career letting others, Ryan, the board, the press, define who I was and what I was capable of. No more. Are you ready? For this? Dad asked as we headed for the door. Once you step into that lobby, everything changes. The company, your marriage, your life. I paused at the threshold, looking back at the boardroom where minutes ago I'd reclaimed not just my company, but my power. Everything already changed the moment Ryan said, "Meet your replacement," I replied. He just didn't realize he was replacing himself. We walked out together, father and daughter, founder and successor, toward the lobby where the next chapter of Meridian's story, my story, was about to begin. Behind us on the boardroom screen, Ryan's angry face glared out from the news feed, already yesterday's news, while mine gazed steadily forward, the face of Meridian's future. I've read somewhere that the most important moments in our lives rarely announce themselves with thunderclaps or dramatic music. Instead, they slip in quietly, disguised as ordinary days, unremarkable decisions, casual introductions. Meet Vanessa, your replacement. 5 words that changed everything. 5 words that forced me to see what I'd been ignoring for years. The press conference lasted 22 minutes. I stood at the podium in the Meridian lobby, surrounded by glass and steel and morning light, my father positioned just behind my right shoulder. A united front. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Employees gathered in nervous clusters, whispering behind cupped hands. I spoke calmly, methodically, outlining the facts without emotion. The unauthorized acquisition attempt, the corporate espionage, the board's unanimous vote to remove Ryan Lawson from his position. My succession to CEO as outlined in the company's founding documents. Not once did I mention our marriage. Not once did I call it betrayal. Meridian Technologies remains committed to our core mission, I concluded, making eye contact with the audience, with the cameras. Innovation, integrity, and independence. Thank you. Questions erupted like a swarm, but I simply nodded once and stepped away, followed by our legal team and my father. Professional. Controlled. The opposite of the emotional woman narrative Ryan had tried to create. That was 3 weeks ago. Now I sit in what was once my father's office, now mine, watching the sun, set behind the mountains. The view never gets old. Neither does the satisfaction of knowing Meridian remains ours. The aftermath unfolded predictably. Ryan called, then texted, then emailed. Threats followed by attempts at reconciliation followed, by more threats. Our attorneys handled everything. I never responded directly. Vanessa disappeared back to Vortex, whose stock dropped 12% after our press conference revealed their attempted corporate raid. Their CEO issued a carefully worded statement denying any knowledge of individual employees' actions. No one believed it. The board rallied behind me with surprising enthusiasm, perhaps overcompensating for their earlier failure. Wilson Blake submitted his resignation, which I declined. "We all make mistakes," I told him. "The measure of character is what we learn from them." My father's health improved dramatically once the stress of watching his company nearly stolen was lifted. His doctors were mystified. I wasn't. Some wounds can't be treated with medication, only justice. A soft knock interrupts my thoughts. Margaret, still the most efficient assistant in the industry, steps in with a slim folder. The final divorce. "Papers," she says, placing them on my desk. "Mr. Lawson's attorney confirmed he's signed everything." "Thank you, Margaret." I don't reach for the folder immediately. Those papers represent the end of 7 years, the official acknowledgement that what I thought was partnership had been something else entirely. Also, the Newton acquisition team needs your approval on the final terms. I smile at that. The Newton deal, the one Ryan had been so determined to control, is proceeding under my direction now, restructured to preserve jobs and integrate technologies rather than strip mine assets. I'll review them this evening. Margaret nods, then hesitates. There's one more thing. A delivery for you. She returns a moment later carrying a small package wrapped in brown paper. No card, no return address. Just my name printed in familiar handwriting. Ryan's. After she leaves, I stare at the package for several long minutes. Part of me wants to throw it away unopened. But curiosity, the same quality that drove me to dismantle and rebuild my first computer at age 9, wins out. Inside is a velvet box. Within that, my mother's sapphire earrings, the ones I'd left behind at our penthouse when I walked out 3 weeks ago. The only possession I'd truly regretted leaving. No note, no explanation, just the earrings, returned at last. Perhaps it's his version of an apology. Perhaps it's strategic, a reminder that he still has access to my possessions, my past. Or perhaps it's simply guilt, that most useless of emotions. Whatever his intention, I secure the earrings in my desk drawer and return to work. The past has its place, but my focus remains forward. My phone buzzes with a text from my father. Dinner at 7? Margaret made reservations at Castellanos. I smile. Our weekly dinner tradition, maintained even through corporate chaos and personal upheaval. Some constants remain. See you there, I reply. As I gather my things to leave, I pass through the executive floor, now transformed under my leadership. The glass walls I'd always championed remain, but I've removed the hierarchical corner offices, including my own. Transparency isn't just architectural anymore. It's built into our new governance structure, our communication protocols, our decision-making processes. Employees nod or smile as I pass, not with the nervous deference they once showed Ryan, but with something more valuable: respect. In the elevator, I check my reflection in the polished doors. I look different somehow. The same features, the same gray eyes and high. Coming up next, you'll see 2 more stories we handpicked just for you. If this one struck a chord, you're going to love what's next. Tap to keep the journey going.